Now, breakdowns between boards and executives aren't as uncommon as you might think. There have been numerous cases in South African corporate history where boards and chief executives or other executives have butted heads, and what usually happens is the CEO gets on their pony and rides off into the sunset. No such luck for Old Mutual, however, whose former chief executive, Peter Moyo, has not been fired once but twice, and has made it a routine habit of pitching up at the office, usually on a Monday morning. This week, after the public holidays, he popped in on Wednesday morning with a court order that says he's entitled to his job back. Old Mutual keeps rebuffing him and telling him that he can't have his job back, and it's headed to the courts and has become a really messy corporate spectacle. But beyond the excitement and the drama and the tabloid nature of this particular battle, it's a far more serious battle. It's the power of boards, it's the importance of executive management, it's the importance of corporate governance. So we come to Old Mutual to chat to the chairman, Trevor Manuel. Trevor Manuel has been the chairman of Old Mutual now since it was listed in London, and he oversaw then the unbundling of Old Mutual, bringing it back to South Africa, which was supposed to be a huge fanfare of excitement, of a new era of growth. And instead, Old Mutual has found itself mired in controversy as the fight between its chief executive and board has taken some fairly ugly turns. This is Taking Stock. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and Trevor Manuel. This runs the risk of getting quite technical, but essentially, Old Mutual's got shares in NMT Capital.
20% of it, yes.
Peter Moyo is the chief executive of Old Mutual. He is also an executive on NMT Capital. This is known, it's disclosed in annual reports, and there's an obligation on NMT Capital every year to pay a certain amount of money to Old Mutual. That money didn't come, and that was then flagged with you.
That was flagged with me. There was also a protocol that governed Peter's conduct in managing the risk, always, of conflict. But managing the risk needed to be done in terms of an agreed protocol, and this didn't happen. And for that reason, by the end of last year, the Related Parties Transaction Committee, which is the only board committee that I've never attended a meeting of, they looked at it and they started asking a series of questions of NMT. They got the cold shoulder and came to the board and said, but it's not appropriate for non-executive directors to be toing and froing with a subsidiary.
So he's a Nedbank director acting for Nedbank here. He's an Old Mutual director acting for Old Mutual here. And the potential for conflict is there for everyone to see. And in this case, it erupted spectacularly because the money wasn't paid from NMT Capital to Old Mutual. Old Mutual raised this as a concern. Why did it take a full year, from July last year, when this issue was first raised, to him finally being suspended?
From February to April, there was a very intensive engagement to try and get the information. Because in order to answer the questions that NMT had put, Old Mutual required information. Like, there was a big distribution of 105 million rand.
That went to three directors of NMT Capital.
Well, Old Mutual got a little bit on the side. What was the balance sheet of NMT when that distribution was undertaken? Was there what is called technically a solvency and liquidity test? I mean, could NMT demonstrate that by distributing all those dividends, that the company remained both solvent and liquid into the future? And so that became very important technical information to support the decision, and that information wasn't forthcoming.
But by now the relationship's broken down, because now you're second-guessing the motives of an executive. By February this year, the moment you start making inquiries, you're saying, I don't trust you.
It wasn't quite as stark, but by the end of April, it became like that. And the board met in a very special session on the 1st of May, excluded the chief executive, and considered this matter. And the board then agreed, firstly, to engage more fully with its then still chief executive, Peter Moyo. And the second decision was to separate out from NMT. And it wrote to NMT the following day to advise that we would seek to separate and recover maximally what we can out of that arrangement. The process then started with a committee of the board on the 2nd of May to try and get from Peter Moyo exactly what the details were. We knew by then that he chaired the board meeting where the decision was taken to distribute the ordinary shares. was he aware of his obligations in terms of his own employment contract that required of him to put Old Mutual first? This was the litmus test.
You just said that a director, when Peter Moyo was at Nedbank, he was wearing a Nedbank hat. When he was at NMT Capital, he would have been wearing an NMT Capital hat. This is where the conflict comes.
Yes, except that he could play no executive role at NMT. I'm saying he chaired the board meeting, but the relationship was covered in a protocol which was a central part of his employment contract. There was an expected behavior of him in terms of the protocol, and that was the basis for the questions.
Did he behave dishonorably?
I think in the view of the board he did.
Did he behave illegally?
That is a test that we must still get through. There are other interests about the conduct of NMT on distributions, because there were sums of money outstanding to other large lenders, and we aware, because we're a 20% shareholder of NMT, of certain processes by other companies, but that hasn't completely broken into the open yet. I think that when you examine that, the questions you're raising now about dishonorability moving into perhaps illegality are going to be the kinds of questions that become the essence of that inquiry.
I mean, this is a fight that has now dragged Old Mutual into the mud. It is a fight that Peter Moyo is certainly in the public domain, running circles around Old Mutual. He's coming to the office. I think he's been here 4 times and been denied access to the building. He's playing a public relations game with Old Mutual. Do you feel like he's winning the PR war?
Some of these are temporary, but I think it's because it's an uneven contest. When I sit in the Old Mutual, I take responsibility for a company that is 174 years old. We look to the savings and investment it manages on behalf of so many people across the African continent. We look at the lives of 36,000 employees, and of course we take seriously our responsibility to shareholders. This has to be a long-term commitment. On the other side, everything is about the short term. I'm pretty convinced that Peter Moyo knows that he's not going to walk back and take up his position at his desk and continue as though we were back on the 23rd of May. He knows that the relationship now is broken. So you maximize the pressure to maximize what you can get out of it. And I think this is the unevenness of the contest. And because we're focused on the long term, we can't go around acting in quite the same way.
In most cases, if a chief executive or an executive and the board fall out, it's accepted that that is what happens in business. And the executive packs their bags and there's a check and they leave with a handful of money. Was a handful of money ever offered to Peter Moyo at the time, 23rd of May? We're terminating your contract. Here's the rest of your contract. Here's an amount of money to go away quietly.
On the 23rd of May, we suspended him. His first question was, how much money will I get? And we hadn't even considered what that would be. We offered an opportunity to work through this quietly. He refused that. There was a period of about 7 weeks when he remained suspended, when what we'd hoped was that there would be some interaction between lawyers representing Old Mutual on the one side and Peter Moyo on the other, and that numbers would be exchanged and you deal with this thing with dignity. It didn't happen, and so on the 17th, 18th of June, we then dismissed him. He also dismissed the attorneys who were then representing him, and when next there was contact, it was about 2 parts of a set of legal actions, which he lodged on the 27th of June.
Let's talk about those legal actions in a moment, because Peter Moyo came back with allegations of his own. That, not only Trevor Manuel, but members of the board were conflicted too. Not only the breakup of the Old Mutual structure, but also there were questions around money that had been paid for legal costs for Trevor Manuel. The company subsequently put those allegations to bed. But let's talk about them with Trevor Manuel, who's the chairman of Old Mutual, in just a moment.